Living in a multicultural city like Los Angeles has its perks, but it also has disadvantages. One thing we have in common is that we've all dealt with racial slurs, especially with other students at schools when we were younger. We were attracted to Guerilla theater because it uses public performance to highlight a social issue and call for change. Such pieces are meant to disrupt onlookers, not entertain them. We each came up with words and phrases that have hurt us in the past and walked through crowded spaces to call attention to the use of slurs. The first time I was called Armo, I didn't realize it was meant as an insult. It simply sounded like an abbreviation of Armenian. I later learned the person saying it was mocking me. Over time, I developed a mental list of words people used to remind me that my ethnicity was something to be ashamed of. Terms range in their levels of offensiveness. When not critically examined, some may even be considered funny. Walking carpet, for example, is used to comment on hairiness. It's not a comment on an individual, but on an entire population. Never mind that not every Armenian is hairy. Walking carpet implies our genetics are flawed. This is a term I heard tossed around at school, especially during fights. At my middle and high school, insults such as those we wrote down could get people so angry that fights would flare up. It was during these rumbles that physical and verbal offenses were used the most. Even if in another context, a term might be considered humorous by some, during these times it would ignite anger. This is the reason that social change is so necessary. Such fights should not be a concern for young teens at schools. Another insult I have heard is ara. In Armenian, ara is a term that is used in casual conversation similarly to bro. When used against an Armenian, however, it is meant to mock us. Such a slur can be especially hurtful because it uses our own language against us. The use of these slurs aids in the perpetuation of negative stereotypes of not only Armenians, but all other minority groups as well.
Mujer. I think I've lost track of how many times my uncle has called me this over the years. Always saying that because I am a mujer, that means that I will let some man come dominate me and brainwash me. Those are his thoughts. Beaner. I remember posting a picture once of me and my brothers at Yogurtland, and a Caucasian female commented, "You effing beaners." This hurts me because I know that she is using racism to put us down. A word that is associated with the food from our beloved culture, or that they associate it with our culture. Illegal. I remember an encounter with a Caucasian girl in middle school. She came up to me and asked me if I was here illegally. But what did it matter to her? All I wanted was to be her friend. Your English is so good. I remember the bagger at Rouse telling me that. But because he thinks that I look indigenous, he thinks I can't speak English well. And he was surprised. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Junior year, I was taking an SAT test when the administrator came up to me and told me Happy Cinco de Mayo. Because of my skin tone color, she thinks that I celebrate the holiday. Tortilla either, another racist term that I have been called. But I refuse to let these negative terms turn me down.
Growing up an Armenian female living in Los Angeles, there have been many slanderous and derogatory terms used to diminish me as an individual. In my experience, racial slurs were mostly used during school, from middle school throughout high school. Having been a woman who liked to dress up, I was often called a kukla, which originates from the Russian word meaning Barbie doll. This could sound like a harmless comment, but behind such terms lies a negative connotation. Calling someone a kukla implies that they are not self-sufficient or rely on aid from a parental figure. It implies that as an individual, I expect to receive gifts and a high-class lifestyle from my father as I am needy or a princess. I find this term to be extremely offensive because I have been a woman who strives for financial and personal independence. Another negative term used against Armenians would be the implication that we all commit fraud. Non-Armenians assume that because someone of Armenian descent drives a lavish car or lives in a large house, they must have acquired such a lifestyle by doing fraud. As someone who comes from a working-class family, this is simply an inaccurate and very disrespectful assumption. I see my parents work over 40 hours a week to provide for their family and their needs, and for someone to diminish their hard work and say that a lifestyle was built through fraudulent activities is simply hurtful.
Growing up in a diverse neighborhood, you would think I would face less discrimination. If anything, I faced more. Beaner, wetback, chunti, paisa. Some of these words I had to look up. Being called a wetback at the age of 5? What did that even mean? Because I had brown skin and spoke Spanish to my parents? That made me a wetback? I was born here. I was a proud American citizen, but I was a proud Mexican. I was a Mexican American, and these words were putting me down and my people down. You will be pregnant by the age of 18. What did that mean? Was I really going to be pregnant by the age of 18? A woman told me that and made me doubt myself. I was not going to live up to these words. I was going to fight against them, do whatever I could to prove these people wrong. Chunti, paisa, stereotypes, putting borders around people, racially discriminating us, making assumptions before getting to know us. A lot of these words created fights, broke up friendships. No one should live in this kind of world.
Uneducated is what they called me. They said I wasn't anyone with knowledge because of the color of my skin and because of the area I had grown up in. I was labeled. I was always accused of being something I never associated myself with. It was derogatory words, discrimination, things I had no association with, but through other people's perceived perception. Queer. I was called this because I enjoyed style and people, and I was outgoing. I was different to everybody else, and I wasn't the typical guy. And without the unexplored self that I was at the time, I was associated with things that I never even associated myself with. I was associated with things that made me feel inferior to the world and to being who I wanted to be. I was associated with trying to better myself because of my social standing. I was called uneducated.
Life continues. Things pass us by. We experience different forms of prejudiceness and different forms of oppression. But we remember in our lives that we are not going to let anything get to us, and instead of allowing one thing that could have completely made and changed our lives, we have to better from it.